radiating through my hand, I became aware of the voice of James Blunt wafting from the small speaker mounted on the wall above our heads. Sensing the stares of the couple on the next table, I turned to them. Their cutlery was frozen in mid-air. Apologizing, I explained that it had not been my intention to elicit a startled response. The male nodded, and the female started to chew again, slowly. I turned back to face Phil. "I will take my swan song now, please," I said. "Bollocks," he said, closing his eyes. His head lolled back. Expelling a long, deep sigh, he said, "There's no way I'm doing that without beer." He headed over to the corner of the wooden bar, as if towards a gallows, leaving me alone at the table to consider my impulsivity. I picked up the empty brown glass ashtray from the table and began to turn it over in my hands, exploring its lines and angling it against the light coming from the bare bulb overhead. What was I going to say? I looked across to Phil, leaning against the bar, provoking the new barmaid. For months I had been agonizing about Claire. I had hoped the ache would ease with time, but it continued to find new ways to branch and fork and twist. I hoped that dedicating myself to the identification of a new mate would help to ease it, but I didn't know how to initiate the process, and the need to talk to someone had become more insistent. But Phil, there were at least 7 billion Homo sapiens who were better listeners than Phil. Returning, Phil slid my pint across the table and sat cupping his own in his lap. Fix You by Coldplay was playing, and Phil looked up at the speaker and said, "Ready when you are, bird." "I am entitled to a complete song, as you know," I said. It better not be Bohemian Rhapsody," he said. "Thinking about it, perhaps I should get another couple of pints, and some crisps, and a cyanide capsule." I told him that crisps weren't permitted. "That's not in the rules," he frowned. "We never said anything about crisps. The rules, as they were explained to me by you, stated that under no circumstances should the swan song be interrupted. Crisps are simply a savoury interruption. When I devised the rules of swan song, I didn't know that they were going to be turned against me." He sulked. "When I consented to the first swan song, I didn't know that you were going to try to convince me that your girlfriend's dependency on moisturizer was evidence of human evolution via an aquatic intermediate." Phil grinned, baring small, closely packed teeth. "Good times. Arctic monkeys, I believe." Stroking his pint, he continued, "I've got a new theory, by the way. It's about the beauty-enhancing properties of car windscreens. Have you ever noticed that when you drive?" Wise to his distraction tactics, I told him that I wasn't listening and picked up the brown ashtray again and tried to compose my thoughts. As Coldplay faded, I looked at Phil and then at the speaker and hoped to avoid a ballad. But from the very first "ooh," I recognized the voice of Mariah Carey. Phil grinned. I rolled my eyes. I can identify the vast majority of birds of the British Isles by their song or calls alone, but by the mid-90s, I had entirely lost the ability to differentiate the songs of Mariah. Unfortunately, the rules of swan song were explicit, and so I had no choice. "The topic of my swan song this evening is Claire and my pair bond quandary," I said. Phil closed his eyes for a second time and pulled his stubby-fingered hand down his broad face and stubbly throat. Feeling no sympathy for him, I continued. "When the Cardiff opportunity arose, Claire said she wanted to talk about our pair bond and the future and, well, given contemporary life expectancies, the future is a very long time. I wasn't expecting to have that discussion, and it's fair to say I was very ill-prepared for it, and I don't just mean that I hadn't made notes." I paused. Phil was peering at me through splayed fingers. How could I make him, the most lay of laymen, understand? We sighed simultaneously. "You see, Phil, I'm not good at making those kinds of choices," I continued. "And you aren't either. We aren't. We aren't even supposed to make them. In the natural world, it is the female who makes such choices." Phil's fingers closed like blinds. While I had been unprepared for the talk with Claire, I was very prepared for such signs of dismissiveness from him.